the wealthy cowboy expected to find nothing more than an abandoned cabin at the edge of the frontier. Instead, he found an elderly widow living completely alone, with barely enough food to last another week. She asked for nothing, complained about nothing, and greeted him with a smile he would never forget. But when the cowboy discovered the heartbreaking reason she refused to leave that old cabin, he made a decision that not only changed her life forever but brought an entire town to tears. Stay with us, because this unforgettable story proves that one act of kindness can echo for generations. The morning sun rose over the wide Arizona frontier, covering the rolling hills and open fields with a warm golden light. Daniel Brooks guided his horse along a quiet trail that crossed the edge of his ranch. As one of the most successful ranch owners in the region, Daniel spent his days checking fences, watching over cattle, and making sure every part of his land was cared for. Although many people admired his success, Daniel never believed that wealth alone made a person important. His father had taught him long ago that a person's true value was measured by honesty, kindness, and the way they treated others. As he rode farther into a quiet part of the valley, something unusual caught his attention. A thin stream of smoke rose gently into the clear morning sky. Daniel frowned. He had ridden this trail many times, yet he had never noticed anyone living nearby. Curious, he followed the narrow path until an old wooden cabin appeared between several large cottonwood trees. Time had faded the wood, and climbing vines covered part of the front porch. A small vegetable garden grew beside the cabin, carefully tended despite the dry ground. Daniel stepped from his horse and knocked softly on the door. After a few moments, the door slowly opened. An elderly woman with kind gray eyes smiled warmly. "Good morning," she said. "It has been a long time since anyone visited." "My name is Daniel Brooks," the cowboy replied politely. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all," she answered. "Please come inside." The cabin was simple but spotless. Every chair, shelf, and table had been carefully cared for through the years. Fresh bread rested on the table beside a small basket of vegetables from the garden. "My name is Margaret," the woman said with a gentle smile. "This cabin has been my home for many years." Daniel noticed there was no sign that anyone else lived there. "You are here alone?" he asked quietly. Margaret nodded. "My husband passed away many years ago. Since then, it has just been me." She spoke without sadness or complaint. Instead, her voice carried quiet strength and gratitude. Before Daniel left, Margaret handed him a small loaf of fresh bread. "It is not much," she said, "but kindness should always be shared." Daniel accepted the gift with respect. As he rode away, he looked back at the lonely cabin standing peacefully beneath the tall trees. He had come expecting to inspect another part of his ranch. Instead, he had found someone the world seemed to have forgotten. And deep in his heart, Daniel knew this would not be his last visit. Early the next morning, Daniel filled 2 saddlebags with fresh bread, dried fruit, vegetables, warm blankets, and a few simple cooking supplies before riding back to Margaret's cabin. When he arrived, she was already outside watering her small garden with a wooden bucket. She smiled as she saw him. "I was hoping you might come back," she said. Daniel handed her the supplies. "I brought a few things that might make the coming weeks easier." Margaret looked through the bags with grateful eyes but gently returned one of the blankets. "Thank you," she said kindly. "But someone else may need this more than I do. I have enough to stay warm." Daniel admired her quiet generosity. Even with so little, she thought first about others. They spent the afternoon talking on the front porch while a gentle breeze moved through the cottonwood trees. Margaret pointed toward the old cabin. "My husband and I built this place with our own hands many years ago. Every board, every window, and every stone reminds me of the life we shared." She invited Daniel inside once again. On one wall hung several faded family photographs. A wooden table stood near the window, polished so carefully that it still reflected the afternoon light. Beside the fireplace rested an old rocking chair. "My husband made that chair for me on our first wedding anniversary," Margaret said with a warm smile. "He always said that a home is built with love long before it is built with wood." Daniel walked quietly through the cabin. Nothing inside was expensive, yet every object seemed to hold a precious memory. He noticed a shelf filled with carefully folded letters tied together with a blue ribbon. "I still read one of his letters every Sunday," Margaret said. "His words remind me that kindness never grows old." Daniel lowered his eyes with respect. As the afternoon passed, he realized Margaret had never asked anyone for help. She had learned to care for herself with patience and dignity. Before leaving, Daniel asked softly, "Have you ever thought about moving into town where life might be easier?" Margaret looked around the little cabin before answering. "This is where we dreamed together. This is where we laughed, worked, and welcomed neighbors whenever they needed a meal or a place to rest." She smiled gently. "If I leave this place, I leave behind part of the life we built together." Daniel understood. She was not holding on to an old cabin. She was protecting a lifetime of cherished memories. As he mounted his horse, he looked back one more time. He had come to offer supplies, but Margaret had given him something far more valuable. She had reminded him that the greatest treasures are often the memories we choose to keep alive. Daniel could not stop thinking about Margaret after returning to his ranch. Her kindness, her gratitude, and the way she treasured every memory stayed with him. He decided that helping her did not mean changing her life. It meant making sure she could continue living the life she loved. The next morning, Daniel rode back to the cabin carrying a toolbox instead of supplies. Without making a fuss, he repaired a loose section of the roof that had begun to leak during heavy rain. He strengthened the front steps, replaced a broken window shutter, and fixed the old gate that had become difficult to open. Margaret watched from the porch with a gentle smile. "You did not have to do all this," she said. Daniel smiled back. "I know. I wanted to." Over the next several days, he returned whenever he had time. He cleared fallen branches from the yard, repaired the garden fence, and cleaned the water well so it could be used more easily. Soon, a few neighbors noticed Daniel's visits. A local carpenter quietly offered to repair the porch railing. The blacksmith mended Margaret's old cooking stove. A teacher from the nearby town stopped by with several books, knowing Margaret enjoyed reading in the evenings. None of them expected anything in return. One afternoon, Margaret looked around her little home as friends worked together outside. With tears of gratitude in her eyes, she turned to Daniel. "For many years, I thought people had forgotten this little cabin." Daniel gently shook his head. "No, Margaret. They simply needed someone to remind them that you were here." As the afternoon sun warmed the valley, laughter filled the yard once again. For the first time in many years, the old cabin no longer felt alone. It had become a place where kindness quietly brought people together. One quiet afternoon, Daniel helped Margaret organize an old wooden chest that had not been opened in years. Inside were neatly wrapped journals, faded photographs, and dozens of carefully folded letters. Margaret smiled as she gently picked up one of the journals. "My husband wrote in these almost every evening," she said. "He believed every act of kindness was worth remembering." With her permission, Daniel began reading a few pages. The journals told the story of a couple who had quietly helped anyone who came to their door. They offered warm meals to hungry travelers, shared water during dry seasons, and welcomed families who had nowhere else to rest. They never asked for payment or recognition. Helping others was simply the way they chose to live. Daniel realized that many families in the nearby town had benefited from Margaret and her husband without ever knowing who had helped them. He shared the story with several community members. As people learned the truth, they were deeply moved. Many remembered hearing their parents or grandparents speak of a kind couple in a little cabin, but no one had known their names. The forgotten cabin was no longer just an old home. It had become a symbol of compassion, generosity, and the lasting impact that simple acts of kindness can have on an entire community. A week later, the people of the nearby town gathered outside Margaret's cabin on a bright Saturday morning. Families arrived carrying flowers, fresh bread, and homemade meals. Children laughed as they helped clean the garden, while neighbors planted colorful flowers along the front path. Daniel stood quietly beside Margaret as she looked around with grateful eyes. "I never imagined I would see this place full of life again," she said softly. The town leader stepped forward with a warm smile. "This cabin has reminded us that kindness should never be forgotten. We hope it will always be a place where neighbors help one another." Everyone agreed. From that day on, the little cabin became a welcoming place where travelers could rest, neighbors could gather, and anyone in need could find a friendly face. Before leaving, Margaret turned to Daniel. You came here thinking you were helping one lonely widow, she said. Instead, you helped an entire town remember what truly matters. Daniel smiled as he looked across the peaceful valley. The greatest riches are not measured by the land we own, he replied. They are measured by the lives we brighten along the way. As the evening sun settled behind the hills, the old cabin stood stronger than ever, filled not only with treasured memories but also with new hope that would inspire generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt journey across the frontier. Daniel's story reminds us that true wealth is not measured by money, land, or success. It is measured by the kindness we show, the promises we keep, and the lives we touch when no one is watching. Sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can restore hope and bring an entire community together. If this story warmed your heart, please like this video. Your support helps us bring more meaningful Wild West stories to viewers around the world. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more original frontier stories filled with courage, compassion, unforgettable characters, and inspiring moments from the Old West. Question of the day: if you had discovered Margaret's cabin, what would you have done to help her? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We enjoy reading every comment and hearing your perspective. If this story inspired you, share it with your friends and family. A simple story of kindness can brighten someone's day and remind us all that compassion still has the power to change lives. Thank you for watching, and until our next adventure across the frontier, take care, be kind to others, and remember that even the smallest act of generosity can leave a lasting legacy.